Hello again, my lovelies, and welcome back to another review from Through the Eyes of Enji, where we're trying to review 101 films in 365 days, raising money for We Are With You and the Shawbury Village Players. Just a bit of admin before we start. We're now at £310. So I've been waiting for the last donation to come through and the last recommendations before I split the money up. So I'm hoping that next week I will actually finally be able to split the money and get it sent out. So thank you again, everybody who's donated, everybody who has nominated films. I now have all 101 films with a final recommendation for the IPCRIS file. So no more recommendations coming in for films, please. But if you do want to donate, then your money will still go to a good cause. Now, this week we are covering the Tommyknockers. It was released in 1993, directed by John Power, written by Lawrence D. Cohen, based on the book by Stephen King. It starred Jimmy Smits as Jim Gardner, Marg Helgenberger as Bobby Anderson, John Ashton as Butch Duggan, Alice Beasley as Becca Paulson, and Robert Carradine as Bryant Brown. The story is, the small town of Haven becomes a hotbed of invention, all run by strange green-powered devices. The whole town is digging something up in the woods, and only an alcoholic poet can discover the secret of the Tommyknockers. Okay, first and foremost, this review should have been done a while ago. Real life got in the way, the 3-hour runtime put me off, and rather than working through 2 to 3 films on a Saturday, I was struggling to work my way through one. Star Trek was bad enough, but working my way through the Tommyknockers felt like it was going to be a real hardship. Which is weird, because you'd think that spending 3 hours in the world of a Stephen King adaptation would be a very pleasant way for me to burn through an evening. But this isn't just any Stephen King adaptation, it's Tommyknockers. So you might have noticed the massive bookshelves behind me while I record, and there's a real eclectic mixture of different genres and stories in these bookshelves. But this bookshelf in particular, that one there, is just covered with Stephen King. And the top 2 shelves in particular are first edition Stephen Kings. I am, quite clearly, a fan. I've read Stephen King books in 12 hours straight without sleeping. That was 11/22/63. I've been freaked out on subway trains by Stephen King's in-depth descriptions, which was The Shining. I've been so absorbed by Stephen King books that I've missed trains. That was The Stand. And I've felt my life change and met some of my best friends through his stories, and that would be The Dark Tower. And then, on the other side of the tracks, there's Stephen King books that I haven't been able to finish because I haven't enjoyed them, which was Dolores Umbridge, or because I didn't connect with them in the same way as I did, say, with Through the Eyes of the Dragon. And then, round about in the middle, there's a few books like The Tommyknockers, which as a book is really very weird, much like Dreamcatchers is really weird. And whilst being unpleasant isn't unusual in Stephen King stories, these books in particular, well, they stand out, shall we say. Now, there's always very similar themes in Stephen King, and you can understand why they're better suited to TV shows or to miniseries than they are for big screen adaptations. Stephen King writes by the pound, and all of his characters are fully developed characters, and they all have an impact on the story. One of the reasons I can't quite bring myself to watch the new version of The Stand with Whoopi Goldberg is because that's one story which I don't think I'll ever be able to complete. I don't think it'll ever be able to be told right, just because of the complexity of the characters and how they drive the story. So when I realised that the Tommyknockers wasn't just a 90-minute quick take on a long and complex story, oh, Dark Tower, we're going to have words. But instead, it was a 3-hour mini-series. I was still thinking it wouldn't be able to get through the complexities of the characters and the world building by the end of it, because I don't think it ever could. And watching the Tommyknockers, I got the impression that it was written before King went sober, as the character of Guard seems to be written from personal experiences. When I checked on it afterwards, I wasn't at all surprised to find out that I was right. King himself commented that it's an awful book, but at least, unlike Cujo, he actually remembers writing it. And Tommyknockers could be good if rewritten to about half the original length. When depicting the substance abusing author, Jimmy Smits does a pretty good job selling the character, fighting constantly against his addictions, and there's a couple of neat little acting moments as he hunts around the hidden little niches in his old house from where he hides booze. And it can't have been an easy role to play, playing the only sane man in an insane world, whilst constantly fighting an addiction, and Smits sells it pretty well. And not all, some of the supporting cast made good use of their roles. Robert Carradine as Bryant and Tracy Lords being an actress of, should we say, limited ability. She plays the role of a constantly horny postwoman who turns into a really creepy character with a death ray later on. And Carradine plays a really hissable villain by the end. But by the end, the huge cast of characters that King came up with and described in painstaking detail is boiled down to about 5 characters who we actually recognise. And if this was only a film that was only a couple of hours, I'd say, okay, fair enough. You've only got limited time. You can't go through every single character. But this is a mini-series that has a bit more time to breathe and spread its wings a bit, so it's somewhat less excusable. The rest of the cast, unfortunately, are portrayed in such a way that it seems really obvious what fate has in store for them. I mean, come on. If one of the opening scenes is a bunch of schoolchildren being shown a creepy room full of dolls, and I was watching it going, gee, I wonder what's going to happen to the character that owns all those dolls. But then, boiling down a Stephen King book is it's almost inevitable that when trying to compress the complicated themes and characters into a manageable length, and again, I suspect we're going to talk about that more when we get to The Dark Tower. However, unlike The Dark Tower, this isn't a Stephen King book that I'm really familiar with. However, one thing I was aware of is that the end of the book is a hell of a lot darker than the film, and the body count is much, much higher. People's behaviour is changed quite a lot too. Whereas in the book, only one character, Nancy, the before mentioned horny postwoman, in the miniseries, she's the only one who goes psychotic. Whereas in the book, it's pretty much everybody's state of mind. In the miniseries, Becca is told that her husband is having an affair by a talk show host, which rather, in fairness, that works better than it being a picture of Jesus on the wall telling her. And I guess because of the budget, the physical transformation of becoming in the miniseries is shown by just teeth falling out and a bit of a skin rash. Whereas in the book, it was hair falling out, it was blood turning green, it was sexual organs disappearing. Yeesh. And thinking about it, Guard in the book is a lot more of an asshole than he is in the TV show, in the miniseries. Possibly to make him more appealing as a hero, but he reads like a stereotypical Trump voter in the book. I mean, definitely Peter the dog definitely has a much worse time in the book, but I guess they couldn't show that in the series. And actually, no, let me check my notes. So, in the book, Butch the sheriff is brainwashed into killing himself. He's not killed by a soft drink dispenser. Yes, really. Bobby doesn't survive the book. She's given a mercy killing like old Yeller. The aliens don't come back to life to attack Guard in the book. They stay dead because King knew you didn't have to have a token action sequences of an author killing aliens with an axe in the book. The list goes on and on. And what I'm trying to say is the makers of the miniseries tried to condense King's work and remove some of the weirder stuff. But Stephen King horror often is weird. And by removing some of the more gruesome details, then you lose some of what makes it original. one thing I've noticed as a warning sign when reading Stephen King books is that when things are going well, you can bet that it's going to fail horribly, heartbreakingly wrong in the not too distant future. And that kind of rise and fall isn't demonstrated very well, if at all, in the Tommyknockers. In fact, I'd argue that the Tommyknockers has been dumbed down from the source material, and also had a lot of the dark humour that makes even bad Stephen King enjoyable, has been drained away to make something that's actually quite dull, and takes itself far too seriously, considering the storyline they're dealing with. And maybe that's my main issue with the Tommyknockers, other than its length, because it's half the length of the Stand miniseries, and about half as much happens with that runtime. And despite the amount of time we spend in this world, we don't actually spend enough time getting to know these characters. So, come the end, we don't really give a shit about what happens to them, especially in this crazy, batshit mad ending. So, I think not long after the 2 hour mark, whoever was adapting this work just kind of went berserk and just stopped caring about anything making sense. And they had all the characters just, you're all becoming now. We're not going to tell you how the green energy from the spaceship, which we clearly see transmitting to a few characters, we're not going to show you clearly how that transmits from person to person. Unless it's from fireworks. And if that's the case, when these 4th of July, all these green fireworks start going off, and if we're going to say that that is the Tommyknockers transferring, getting into people's minds, that's fair enough that the lead guard, it doesn't work on him, because it's made quite clear that he's got a metal plate in his head, and that's why the Tommyknockers can't get their fingers into him. But unfortunately, there are other characters witnessing the fireworks who aren't touched by the Tommyknockers at all. And so come this ending, we have this mad cult with all their clunky inventions, and they're either mustache-twirlingly evil, or they're dumb rednecks, or they're mindless drones. They seem to fall into one of these three, and it doesn't make sense that we have all this complexity build up for certain characters, only for it just to fall away and then just swing wildly right field to change into these completely different characters. And if it affected, say, everyone, like it does in the book, with everyone becoming psychotic, I might buy a little more into Tracy Lord's Nancy turning into this death ray wielding psychopath if it was happening to everybody else, but I don't get why it only happened to her. And much like Sting being steam cooked or the fucking clown cheerleading, I have absolutely no idea what to make of the axe wielding poet even, plugging himself, literally, into the alien ship for the finale. When I tried to explain to Laura what the hell was going on, I realised just how little sense the story actually makes come the end, and found myself, as I watched through the finale, again begging for the taste of cold steel that would end watching this. And something else that really racks up another point against this lumbering, stitched-together monstrosity, despite being an adaptation of a Stephen fucking King story, it's not very scary. Now, granted, some of King's works are more thrillers than horror. Is Misery a horror or a thriller? Answer on a postcard, I know where I sit. But at least you find yourself either wanting to turn the page, or in the case of the adaptations, to watch on, because the build-up to the climax is thrilling enough that you're on the edge of your seat. And when it's pure-blooded horror, then you find yourself watching through your fingers because it gets under your skin. And there's some deep part of you that when you cover your eyes when you're watching something scary, you're still peeking through the fingers. It Chapter 1 was a great example of that. And Tommyknockers doesn't do either of these things. Now, speaking of it, this wasn't the only Stephen King-based miniseries that came out during this period. Oh, I know I've already made references to The Stand, but also we had The Shining, and it got its first adaptation in this period too. And even though Tim Curry was a really creepy Pennywise, the film doesn't really hold up. Sorry, fans. Every time you bring up, oh, Tim Curry was this fantastic Pennywise, I want to turn around and say, did you see the fucking monster spider at the end? And if it ever did, Children of the Corn minis doesn't hold up either. Miniseries rather than films were seen as the optimum way of presenting King's work because of the amount of detail that's packed into the books. Now, do the adaptations of King's works ever work out on the big screen? Let's put a note on that. We'll come back to that when we examine The Dark Tower. But when they're adapted to the small screen and they're given room to breathe, do they work? I mean, they can do. 11/22/63 certainly did, with some bolted-on changes for the small screen to pad out the length that weren't totally unwelcome. Although I might be biased, because I loved the book, and I'd been recently burnt at the time by that bloody Preacher adaptation, so frankly I'd take what I could get. And I've heard great things about 1922 and Gerald's Game, but then on the other side of the coin, we've also had the adaptation of Under the Dome, which I couldn't get past the first episode of because of its wild deviation from the characters of the books. Ultimately, Stephen King's books work best as books because they can take as long as they need to really open up and reveal who these people are and what they're doing. I think, really, it's always going to be an issue reviewing an adaptation of a work that I'm familiar with. I'm seriously cacking myself on how the hell I'm going to cover The Dark Tower when we get to that, given how familiar I am with the source material. But even with not really remembering the book of the Tommyknockers, I found the miniseries to be it felt really cheap and thrown together. And it's an adaptation of a book that was never very good to begin with. A half-assed adaptation of The Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which forgot to add in a sense of creeping dread or anything resembling real horror. Often, the most terrifying thing is what we can't see. And putting the eventual protagonists of this whole tale on open display and up and walking around in the adaptation, rather than just identifying what Robert Caro said when he was writing about Lyndon B. Johnson, that power doesn't corrupt, power reveals. And by giving the people of the town the power to create these amazing things, it shows who they really are. From the pawn shop worker who is just desperate for money, the cafe cook who complains about having to work so hard, reveals that really is very lazy, and the writer who doesn't actually want to write but wants it to be done automatically for her as she sleeps, or the bloody postal worker who's just doesn't want to sort the mail out but just have sex with her co-worker, the betrayed wife who really just wants to kill her husband. Incidentally, everyone's so horny in this. Anyway, power doesn't corrupt, power reveals. And with everything that's come to light in the last few days, there's at least one person who was in a position of power whose motives were revealed when they were given that power. And that's some quite dark, terrifying food for thought that's probably scarier than anything that's in the Tommyknockers. Oh, that was a bit of a dark note to end on, wasn't it? It's not going to be dark next time because the next film we're going to be covering is The Meg. And then after that, we are going to be finally doing a film that I know I love, that I think I'm going to find it very difficult to poke holes in, and that's going to be Excalibur. And then we've also got, after that, The Two Popes, which when I put my hands up and said to the nominator, never heard of it, don't know anything about it, I got a message back saying, I just want to see you squirm. So, got a feeling I'm not going to like that one. Hopefully, with it getting a bit lighter, I'm recording this now at 5:30, and you might not be able to see the study behind me, but well, we can do something about that. There you go. As the days are getting longer, I'm hopefully going to be able to record more. So hopefully, I'll be able to start recording at lunchtime again, and I'll start working through these films at a higher rate. One thing I might well do is, as we get closer to the 12-month mark, I might do a abridged episode. So probably round about the length that this episode is going to run at, because I think talking about Stephen King, like a Stephen King book, is going to go on for quite a while. So I'm expecting this to be around about the 23-minute mark, which is probably going to be about half of what the Dark Tower episode is going to be when we eventually hit that. So I might just try and bang through 5 films within the 25 minutes, put a little timer up, try and bang my way through as quickly as possible. We might well try doing that after we've done the 2 Popes, just to see how it goes, just to ramp up the schedule a bit. It just means I've got to watch 5 films in a week, so look forward to telling Laura that one. Anyway, thank you again for watching. Thank you again, everyone who's donated. Subscribe so you get notifications when I put new reviews up. Share the video around, get a few more people watching it, and just throw a like on as well, just to get me a bit more active in the eternal YouTube algorithm. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time with the Meg. Thanks again. Bye.